Well, your film this week, Joel, burns deep. In the fine tradition of Kramer versus Kramer, Ali versus Norton, Kasparov versus Karpov, it's Megalon versus Godzilla.
This time, we watched Season 2, Episode 12, Godzilla vs. Megalon.
In which nuclear bomb tests brings out monsters to destroy us, and the monster that destroyed us before is now saving us!
Oh, well, that's nice of him.
I know, right?
Yeah, but first we've got some follow-up. We recorded the last couple episodes a little bit out of sequence, so we're going to have to think back a few episodes because there's some follow-up about Crash of Moons. First bit of follow-up is that during the recording, I think we kept calling it Crash of the Moons, which is clearly what the title should be, but it's not. It's Crash of Moons.
Well, look at us just grammaring it up. I don't know.
They got it wrong on the show, too. It's fine. Despite your protestations, the Cleolanta fans came out in force to defend their queen, or suzerain, or whatever you want to call it.
Good for them. Good for them. You should do that. If there's a queen that you love, support her, man. Or, person.
Yeah, people of all sorts of genders came out in support of Cleolanta, and that's wonderful. Also relating to Crash of Moons, we got a message from Alan, who writes in to say, I was listening to your show about Crash of Moons when you mentioned Hogan's Heroes. I know Charlotte doesn't like war movies, but while the tunnels and such come from The Great Escape, Schultz and Clink, at least his names, come from the William Holden vehicle Stalag 17. Thought you'd like to know. Keep up the fun. Love, Alan.
Aw, thank you, Alan. It's always good to get some more information on the things that we're looking at.
It's true. I should have mentioned Stalag 17, I suppose. That segment, I wasn't planning on talking that much about Hogan's Heroes because I thought you knew about it, but you didn't. No. And then I was like, oh no, we must inform Charlotte. She must know. She has to know.
And I feel bad. I've had all of this time over the holidays and I didn't watch Hogan's Heroes. Not once. I should have gotten a flavor for it. I should have known this was going to come up.
Also from the Sword of the Dragon, devoted listener Maria wrote in with a smallish correction. When Nora leaves her husband, Torvald Helmer, in a doll's house, she also leaves her kids behind, which is not what I said in the episode. And Maria's right, and I'm wrong. This was controversial enough, she continues, that Ibsen wrote an alternative ending for the German version where she's brought to see her kids and breaks down, with the implication that she then stays in her terrible marriage. Ibsen hated that version. Yes, he was basically forced to write that version.
I mean, it's a step down from Medea straight up killing the kids. You can't walk back from that one, right?
Yes. No, as far as parental decisions go, Nora made a more reversible decision than Medea did. Right. Well, speaking of friends to all children, happy Gamuary, Charlotte.
Happy Gamuary, Chris. It's the most wonderful time. Sometimes.
Hey, it's going to be a slightly better Gamuary maybe this time because we're not doing a Gamera movie again.
Some of the Gamuary episodes, they were just fine. Some of the Gameras are fun.
Oh, they absolutely are.
It was just really rough in the beginning when you guys were doing Gamuary and you were watching the same episode twice, once from KTMA and once from like a newer version. Ooh, I was listening to those episodes as a listener and not as a host thinking, that's a bold choice, everybody. Bold choice to watch the same one twice and have to do this whole format of a show.
Yes. So after putting out 11 Gamera episodes over 6 years, I believe, we are now ready to talk about an off-brand Gamera. So we look at Godzilla versus Megalon.
This time we watched Season 2, Episode 12, Godzilla vs. Megalon. We open on the destructive force of nuclear bomb tests. It's breaking the world! Though done in remote parts of the Pacific, even Monster Island, home of Godzilla, is bugged by their destructive nature. Cut to an adorable couple out for a picnic, by a lake. Their small boy is paddling on a duck paddle boat type thing when the earth starts to shake and some smoking and fizzing happens in the middle of the lake. The water begins to drain and it seems the boy will be sucked under, but fortunately the men have brought a rocket and a long rope to their picnic and will use them to pull the boy ashore. The lake drains completely, but the trio return home. When the trio arrive home, there are people in their house. There's a fight. The robbers get away, but not before one of the men, who happens to be an amateur race car driver, takes off after the robbers' car. A terribly exciting car chase ensues. The second man and the boy find the house has been ransacked, but the robot the man is working on hasn't been touched. Nothing's been taken. That's weird, right? Still, the inventor finishes the robot and names it Jet Jaguar. But the robbers left a listening device, so they know the robot's complete. They return, capture the inventor and the boy, and send them away in a metal box. The race car driver is kept tied up. One robber stays at the house to control the robot, and he tells the race car driver that he's from Seatopia, a kingdom that is miles underground where people were trapped after a big quake 3 million years ago. But these folks, they are super clever. They found a way to make their own oxygen and even their own sun. Yes, there is a sun inside the earth, miles underground. Anyway, this culture, though clever enough to make an atmosphere and a sun, is not interested in inventing their own robots. They're going to steal them and make an army to defeat the people of Earth because, let's face it, we suck. We suck with our nuclear testing and the basic destruction of the world. The Seatopians release Megalon, a super monster bug type with razor arms and electrical or fire power. Jet Jaguar, under Seatopian control, leads Megalon to Tokyo, where it destroys everything. But the race car driver escapes the robber, saves the inventor and the boy, and the inventor uses his robot to take back control of Jet Jaguar. Jet Jaguar is sent to Monster Island to get Godzilla, the only one who can save us. While we wait for Godzilla to swim through half the Pacific, the army tries to kill Megalon, but their weapons have no power over it. Jet Jaguar returns before Godzilla can, so he grows to the size of Megalon and starts fighting it. This makes the Seatopians worried, so they send a second monster, Gigan, to tag team with Megalon. They beat on Jet Jaguar, and it seems hopeless until Godzilla arrives. At first, it seems like they're dominating Godzilla too, but not for long. Godzilla takes down this tag team with the help of Jet Jaguar. Both flee home, and Seatopia reseals the pathway to their kingdom. Jet Jaguar and Godzilla shake hands over a job well done, and Godzilla goes home. Jet Jaguar returns to normal person size, and a family of 4 is formed: race car driver, inventor, boy, and robot. The world is saved for now. I mean, we really do need to suck less with the nuclear stuff, everyone, or seriously, this is just going to happen again. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, we open with Joel, Crow, and Tom pretending to be hosting a morning show and talking us through all the upcoming star-studded segments. Stay tuned for a visit from Robert Goulet, who will sing us a song and share his famous Bloody Mary mix. I can't wait. The invention exchange involves impromptu Halloween costumes made from stuff around the house. Crow is turned into the floor of a movie theater. Tom wears a milk carton and goes as a missing child. And Joel wraps his head in aluminum foil and the edge of a pie pan to go as Jiffy Pop. Back in Deep 13, Dr. Forrester has some ABS tubing on his arms to look like a foosball goalie, and Frank is wearing an air filter over his eyes to look like Geordie LaForge. These are all really good low-effort costumes. And by low effort, I mean much higher effort than anything I've ever bothered with. Anyway, during the first movie break, Joel walks in on Tom and Crow looking at some naughty Polaroids? Well, they quickly distract him by showing off their monster drawings, and then the bots go back and forth, one-upping each other about how wicked, awesome, cool their monsters are. Joel eventually gets bored of their arms race, and the bots go back to looking at their dirty pics. Then we get a sketch that is aged poorly and includes a problematic word that refers to a group of people. Again, didn't we just do this a few episodes ago? Okay, here's the sketch. It's a compilation of action clips from today's movie with some cool action music playing underneath, and every so often there's a freeze frame on the race car driver, and Joel, Crow, and Tom take turns saying, Rex Dart, Eskimo Spy. Oof. Well, we'll have more to talk about this in a moment. But let's refresh our palates with some buttery popcorn. Crow is dressed up as popcorn magnate Orville Rettenbacher. Sorry. Lawyers are telling me it's Orville Popcorn. And Tom is playing his grandson, Gary. Family tensions almost immediately emerge, and it all gets real intense real fast. After the movie, Joel has given Crow and Tom new limbs, and while Crow doesn't really like his lobster claw, Tom enjoys his Swiss Army knife arm and his flamethrower. Then they present a translation of Jet Jaguar's theme song from the end of the movie, and Joel reads out some letters, including one from Charlotte, age 7. That's not our Charlotte, though. Darn. Oh, and we end with Frank struggling with a level of Super Mario Brothers for some reason. What do you think, sirs?
Where would you like to begin?
I would like to begin by asking you, on that poll of 100 favorite MST3K episodes ever, where do you think this one landed?
Oh, yes. The one that I'm like wrong on every single one. Like my own personal rankings are so different from everyone else's, which doesn't make me wrong. It just makes me different, I suppose. Wow.
This is the poll that they did when they were first doing the Kickstarter for the Netflix seasons back in 2016.
Remind me, how high up was like Prince of Space?
Prince of Space was number 15 on the charts.
Ooh, see, I would put this higher than Prince of Space, but I don't think it scored better than 15th. I don't know, Chris. I would put it higher than Prince of Space just based on, like it's in color. It's a Godzilla movie. You have the most ridiculous fight move ever with Godzilla sliding on his tail to like kick Megalon in the, pecs with his feet. I mean, it's ridiculous and silly, and the couple is so cute, and you have Jet Jaguar, like it's a fun movie, and I think they do a decent job with the riff. I would put it higher than 15. 13. I think it's 13.
13 turns out to be Ega. 14, right in between them, is the original Gamera movie from season 3. Now, this comes out at 19, though. It's very high on the list.
Okay.
Just above Jack Frost.
Oh, wow. I mean, it's interesting that there's so many of these Japanese monster movies all really close. Not that Prince of Space is a monster movie, but it's kind of in that same genre of movie that they were all kind of mocking in the same sort of way. So yeah, I guess it's interesting that it's all together right there.
Would you also rank the episode about that high? Top 20 of all time?
It's really hard for me to put it in the top 20 of all time, but it is really recognizable, right? Because that clip of Godzilla on his tail sliding down, like that's in the credits.
Yeah.
It's in the opening credits. So it's one of those things where it's just like, if you are trying to think of your favorite episodes, that's going to signal you to one, right? So I can see it landing a little higher just because of that overexposure. But yeah, no, I don't think I'd put it in the top 20. What do you think?
I would not put it in my top 20 for sure.
Are you surprised that it made fan favorite top 20?
No, because I do hear people talking about it. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily, I never liked this episode as much as all that. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'd watched any Godzilla movies when I first saw this and the other Godzilla episode that comes right after it.
Are you saying this is your first exposure to Godzilla ever?
Well, I mean, I knew what a Godzilla was, but I don't think I'd watched any when I first saw this episode when it first came out.
So you knew like the general cultural osmosis of Godzilla, but not any specific interactions with Godzilla media.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, although there are some charming things in this episode, I found the movie part boring for the most part. And I still kind of feel that way. I don't know. We'll talk more about Godzilla stuff in a bit. But I don't know. There are things I like about this movie, and there are things now that just,
Yeah.
oh dear. Hey, let's talk for a little bit of a moment about how we don't use that word anymore.
That's fine. Yes, let's do that.
This is a thing that I find is pretty commonly understood in Canada, at least amongst people that I tend to talk to, and is less frequently known about in the US, although that's been changing as well. And I'm just going to quote here from a really wonderful book called Elements of Indigenous Style, a guide for writing by and about Indigenous peoples by Dr. Gregory Younging. It's a short book. It's very readable if you're interested in issues of how to talk about, how to write about Indigenous peoples and their issues, especially if you're coming from outside. Anyway, the entry for Eskimo. This term came into use in the 17th century to describe the indigenous people who traditionally inhabit the Arctic regions in what are now Canada, Greenland, and Siberia. The term is rooted in explorer lexicon and sometimes has inappropriate qualifiers depending on the explorer who claimed first contact, hence the so-called Mackenzie Eskimos in the Canadian Arctic. Wow. The correct term, Inuit, began to emerge as a term in English in the early 1960s and became accepted English language use in line with what Inuit have always called themselves. The use of Inuit was one of the earliest examples of an Indigenous group in Canada changing terminology to assert their identity. It is very much a term that was applied to groups of people that had very little to do with them and how they understood themselves. And it's incredibly disrespectful and sort of ties in with a history of not listening to and disrespecting those peoples to use it. So
you're saying Inuit started coming into a more popular usage in the 60s? That's still like 60 years ago. It's astonishing that like the dessert that you can buy in the grocery store, the Eskimo pie, didn't change its name until like 2020.
Right. But it is starting to, and I'm glad to hear that. I've definitely read people who have felt very uncomfortably specifically about buying that dessert and seeing a word that is meant to refer to them and having depictions that didn't reflect their lives at all and just all the tropes that are tied up with it. It's a whole thing. I'll put a few more links in the show notes if this is new to anybody, which it may not be. But if you want to read up more about some of the issues around that. And like all these things, some people who this term is applied to don't mind it or even use it or embrace it, and that's their right to, and that's fine. But as an outsider, if you are, like we are, an outsider, don't use that word. Just avoid it. Call groups of people by what they want to be called. Call the individuals by what they want to be called. It's not that hard. Or it can be hard, but it does require actually like paying attention to them and understanding the nuances of their specific situation.
Yes. And isn't that what we're supposed to be doing as people living in a culture and a society together? Like, wars have been fought over less.
Yeah. I don't think Joel and company were like intentionally trying to be awful by using that word. I'm not trying to cancel them over it or anything, but that sketch didn't sit with me. And even like terminology aside, like I guess the joke is because that if you abstract away the meaning of some of it is a fun phrase to say. I guess it feels good on the tongue, but like it's a weird sketch.
No, I entirely agree. And I kind of wonder what made them think of. I don't even know how to approach this, but I don't even know why that was the thing that came up inside of the riffing room. I'm not sure what it is that they're trying to refer to. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what inspired the use of that word.
Yeah. I mean, I think I do kind of know, but it's not something I'm happy with. I think it's just assumptions of what different peoples look like in certain moments, and I don't know. And yet, this sketch and that line of riffs is one of the things people love about this episode.
I mean, if it had used something else, If it had just been Rex, Dart, something else.
Yeah, well, if it, Tokyo Spy or something.
Tokyo Spy, sure. Like the series of like, let's highlight this guy as an action hero. Like he's a better action hero than Mannix. Like, let's just put that on the table,
Exactly. It's a really clever recutting. The music, although a little bit cheesy, is really good for the show. Like it does the job pretty well.
It's appropriately cheesy for what it's backgrounding. Come on.
Yeah, and some of the lines within the movie where they're riffing, where they're talking about, Rex Dart, which is a gret name for a spy, and so forth. Like, I don't know, there's lots of good stuff there. I get it. So yeah, as I said, I didn't grow up watching Godzilla movies, and this was kind of my introduction to Godzilla, and what a weird introduction it was, I suppose.
What a weird introduction, yeah.
But I know you're a big Godzilla head.
I feel like it's really weird to call me that because quite honestly, I'm sure I could walk into a room of people who have actually watched a lot more Godzilla than me, and I would not be able to hold my own. But Godzilla's fun. Like, what a fun idea that there's actually a freaking consequence to some of the stupid stuff we do that destroys the world, that the world might actually, fight back in some sort of way and try and take us down a notch. I love it. And Godzilla is such a great manifestation of that.
Well, and here's the thing. I guess I was familiar with things like Godzilla versus Megalon, where, there's a story about nuclear weapons proliferating and how that has to stop because it'll wake up all the monsters, but it isn't really well sold.
Sure, not in this movie.
No, that's what I'm saying. Godzilla versus Megalon is basically all about leading to the fight at the end where you get to see four guys in big suits beat each other up. That's sort of the point.
Absolutely. That's why the fight is too long. It's like they reached a point where they believed their own hype and they thought people only wanted to watch guys in rubber suits fighting each other. And I mean, they're not entirely wrong, but wow, that fight takes way too long.
Well, partially it's because they had almost no budget by this point in the Godzilla franchise, and so they're making everything stretch. I think they also didn't have much of a script when they started filming. I could be misremembering. Either way, they're making this one also has quite a lot of stock footage in it. Like it's late in this first Godzilla era of films. But getting back to my point. So, like, what do you go to a Godzilla movie for? Well, if it's the 70s and you're watching this era of Godzilla films, you're watching it for, again, the guys in suits whacking at each other and some of the silly moves they make. You're watching for maybe some good destruction of city, and you're watching for a few, like, cool ideas that don't get really well developed about how technology could work.
Sure.
Like the idea of Jaguar taking control of himself and figuring out how to make himself 20 times bigger.
Or using semaphores to, like, communicate with monsters. That was amazing.
Well, it's the sort of thing that I can totally see sticking in a kid's head at an appropriate age, and that plants a seed that makes them think about things later on. As an adult watching it, it's like, well, sure, it's bigger now, I guess.
Well, it can't fight Megalon the size it is right now.
Well, wouldn't it be more interesting if it did figure out some way of doing that? I don't know.
Ooh, yeah, actually.
Yeah, but instead you want to have people that are about the same size because you've got human beings inside of the suits wailing on each other.
Certainly the special effects are much easier if you make them the same size.
So a couple years ago, when I was making a little podcast called It's Just a Show with my friends Adam and Beth.
I remember that show.
It turned out that I didn't know that the original Godzilla movie wasn't like that at all.
No, not at all.
And neither I nor Beth had seen Godzilla at that point. So the three of us went into my basement and we watched Godzilla and we recorded a little Scene of the Scene podcast episode about it, which we'll link in the show notes.
Nice.
And it turned out that actually there's a whole other side of Godzilla, which is like sad and thoughtful and fully engaging with these kinds of issues about trauma and what we do to the environment and what we did in the war and all of this stuff. And it's just, and still being told by people hitting each other in giant rubber suits.
Yes. Yes.
Or now CGI.
Or now incredible CGI. Yeah. No, it's true. I can't believe the difference between something like a Godzilla versus Megalon and the original Godzilla, or the most recent Godzilla movie that's been released, Godzilla -1, which is almost like another origin story for Godzilla, right? Because it takes place in that same time frame, the late 40s. So yeah, it's a totally different vibe. I mean, I would never have taken a tissue to see Godzilla versus Megalon. I'm not shedding tears over this movie, everybody. Missed it or no. But the original Godzilla? You gotta be kidding me. Yeah, I'm shedding tears at that one. That's really emotionally heavy.
It is super heavy. So I gave myself the time to rewatch the original Godzilla. I went to a theater to watch Godzilla -1. Both films are amazing. They both are totally great.
Oh, yes.
Oh my goodness. And I believe you also saw Godzilla -1.
And the original Godzilla as well, because Pluto TV has a Godzilla channel, and they were showing the original Godzilla.
Okay, which one made you cry more?
Oh, the Godzilla -1 made me cry more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really did.
It's real good. I mean, we're going to not have any spoilers here. If we want to talk spoilers, maybe we'll do that as a bonus bit. But
okay.
For the main episode, we're going to avoid spoilers. But there's a lot of, not only is it a very sad movie, much like the original Godzilla was, and it's also got a lot of people doing a really good job crying on the screen.
Yes. Yeah, like the people who are on the screen are having really large emotional connections with each other, and large emotions because they're trying to avoid having emotional connections with each other because they're coming out of war. I don't think that's a spoiler, right? Like, we're looking at Japan in 1945. Like, this is an entire culture that's watched their city crumble and burn, and they're trying to rebuild. And you have all of these people coming home from war not knowing how to process loss of individuals, but also as a country processing loss. It's a lot.
Yeah, as an individual, as a country, but also, that loss of like, can we do anything that will make a difference?
Yes.
Which is also in the original Godzilla, right? They map onto each other in a few really interesting ways, despite telling, in some ways, very different stories, even though in some ways they're very similar stories. It's really interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
Go see them. Yeah. Go see them both if you haven't.
Go see them both.
It's the 70th anniversary of the original Godzilla movie this year. So
happy anniversary, Godzilla!
Happy anniversary. Last year was the 50th anniversary of Godzilla versus Megalon.
I can't believe this original movie is 50 years old. I mean, I can, but I also can't.
1973.
I know.
So it's a little older than us.
Again, shocking. But I mean, I know I've never lived in a world without Megalon, but
so in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Godzilla vs. Megalon, they decided to remake it, but this time make it only 10 minutes long and also completely change the plot.
Oh my God, they didn't really remake it. They just said, like, let's get Megalon in here. Let's have a Godzilla Megalon battle, but let's CG it this time because you know what? Megalon is a super compelling, enormous monster. Not in the rubber suit that we saw, though, but like their CG Megalon where he like pops his wings out and they go to the full extension of a bug's wings, you know, like proportional to that body. Oh my God, if you have an Empire State size bug and it spreads out its wings, they're huge. It was so impressive. I was really impressed. And they gave him more compelling, like, shooting powers. Because I gotta say, okay, in Godzilla versus Megalon that we saw, when he's shooting bombs at people, he, like, barfs little red pellets.
He's adorable.
And they kind of bounce on the ground a little bit. It's really weird. And when he like has to fight anybody, there's all this kicking up of dust. So it looks really muddy. It's really hard to see what's going on. But in the CG Megalon, he's like shooting out like sharp, red, shiny bombs and they explode on contact so you don't get this weird like rubber bounce. It's really good. It looks scary. Like, I don't want one of those things touching me. Like the rubber ball, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to walk a little bit over here so the rubber ball doesn't touch me. But like that big the big red spear that explodes on contact, no, thank you. Like, I don't want that one touching me.
I mean, I have to admit, I appreciated that it was about 10 minutes long.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, it was the perfect length of the fight scene, too. Because about 8 minutes of enormous giant monster fighting enormous giant monster in which nothing on the screen is actually real because it's all computer generated. Mm-hmm. Yeah, few minutes of that is all you need.
But okay, if you're watching the original Godzilla vs. Megalon, what people seem to like about this movie, and some people really do, is how adorable the monsters are and how fun it is and how like you get to see people in rubber suits hitting each other.
That's true. It is charming in its own way.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I had always heard about Godzilla is that like people really like the goofy monsters doing things.
And Godzilla has a goofy face in Godzilla versus Megalon.
Godzilla is at peak goofiness. They have, I think one reviewer described him as being very Kermit.
Oh my God. Hi-ho.
Exactly.
Or like, ching, 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 when you're semaphoring with him and then he's like, and he jumps in the water.
Now, I have to admit, obviously, I am a boring, pretentious person. I like my Godzilla incredibly sad. But I understand the appeal of the incredibly goofy Godzilla. I get why people like it, even if it's not my thing per se. And I want to know, of the four monsters, of the four kaiju that we have in this film, which one's the cutest? Which one's the best little guy?
Oh, well, I mean, if we're going to go with which one is the cutest and the best little guy, Jaguar's the only one who gets little, right? Am I right?
Anybody can be a little guy. You can be any size you want and still be just a little guy.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go over our contenders. We'll start with, of course, the big G, Godzilla.
Classic.
The classic, the long timer. He's been in like 38 films. I say he. In Japanese, they use basically it. And there are varying genders that have been assigned to Godzilla.
It's true. In Godzilla 2000 with the Matthew Broderick inside of it, Godzilla lays eggs in Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
Not
but
a boy.
Officially, still a boy.
All right. That's fair.
Just a boy who lays eggs.
It happens. Sure.
Uses he, him pronouns according to the official translations.
Okay.
I don't know. Gendering Godzilla feels a little weird.
Sure.
Okay, Godzilla. Signature weapon, atomic heat beam. Huh?
Yeah, no, it's true. I love in the Godzilla films when he like lights up his back and then shoots the ray. Ooh, it's so good.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, love it.
And he's got the roar.
The roar, very nice.
So the roar, I don't know if you know the story about this. I'm no Godzilla expert, but I've spent the last several days nose deep in Wikizilla. So apparently the roar was created by the composer for the film, Akira Ifukube, who fantastic work, who produced the sound by rubbing a pine tar resin-coated glove along the strings of a contrabass and then slowing down the playback.
Dang!
It's pretty good. If I remember what I read correctly, in Godzilla -1, the roar there is the original Godzilla roar played and re-recorded at like a giant stadium.
Yes!
So like as loud as possible and tried to capture that to beef it up a lot, which is also just amazing.
Just amazing. I love how thoughtful that is. It is just phenomenal to be like, well, Godzilla can't just sound like anybody. Godzilla has a specific style, a specific sound, but it just needs to be bigger. How do we make it bigger? Like, I don't know, stadium reverb?
And that's exactly the kind of thinking that didn't especially go into Godzilla versus Megalon. But yeah, Godzilla's a good contender. And I mean, I do think his doofy Kermit face is pretty adorable.
I especially love like that Godzilla's like, yeah, I know I'm working with this guy. So at the end, when we win the battle, we shake hands.
Yes.
That's what we do.
Yes. I mean,
it's great.
Seeing the kaiju communicate with each other is always a treat.
It's true. It's true. Would you consider Jet Jaguar a kaiju?
Oh, I am not an expert on that. I believe yes. Yeah, well, let's talk about Jet Jaguar. This is his first appearance.
Is it his only appearance?
It's not, but it takes him a while to come back. There's a lot of other, especially in non-mainline films, there's a lot of Godzilla stuff out there. So, of course, Jet Jaguar gets to come out.
I mean, it's astonishing to me how many monsters there are out there and how they're only attacking Japan. It just doesn't seem fair.
There you go. So Jet Jaguar was created through a contest.
Stop it. It is not.
Toho, the people who make these movies, sponsored a contest called, in translation, Children Monster University. Basically, design a monster, kids. The coolest one will be in our next Godzilla movie.
Nice.
Which is this movie. Mm-hmm. And so a boy named Masaki Sano submitted a monster which he called Red Alone, transliterated into Japanese, but it's the English phrase Red Alone.
Red like I'm reading a book, or red like the color?
Red like the color.
Okay, thank you.
But ironically, the design, as far as I understand it, it was not red at all. It was basically an all-white costume. And when Toho decided to give it a little bit of color, presumably to make it pop on screen a little bit more, I don't know, the kid got really upset about it.
Aww.
And so Toho then turned it into a robot and changed the name.
Well, so be it. So be it.
I hope that kid grew up to be a very bitter adult. And just use that rage.
Say that about all the children.
Well, yeah, because that's all I know. Anyway,
worked for me.
Jet Jaguar looks a lot like a very popular Japanese giant robot called Ultraman.
Oh, okay.
And I guess there are a few others that it kind of looks like. But the person who was in charge of the design of it, the redesign of it, wanted to distinguish it from Ultraman a little bit. So decided to make it deliberately, quote, unattractive and obnoxious to distinguish it.
What?
So do you think this angular, weirdly smirking Jack Nicholson look alike?
I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that he made it look like Jack Nicholson, because now, of course, maybe not now, but in the 90s, when the first Batman movie the first Batman with Michael Keaton, Dark Batman had come out, and, Jack Nicholson was the Joker, and you have the Witches of Eastwick, and you have all of these, movies that are coming out that are letting you know that Jack Nicholson is a hot guy, and then you don't smirk there, Chris.
I will snort.
I mean, the 90s were trying to convince you of that, right? Even Christian Slater tried to convince me of that in Heathers. But there you're looking at Jet Jaguar's face, and I think they were right on with the riff, saying that it looks like Jack Nicholson and making Joker references. So it's hard for me to look at him and be like, nah, that's an unattractive face. It is a little off-putting, though.
Yeah.
Right? Like the almost wicked smile where you think something not okay is going on in the brain of that kaiju right there. Yeah, it's a lot.
All right, let's look at the other ones. Let's look at the one who gets a little bit of name recognition in the title. Let's talk about Megalon.
Megalon looks like a bug.
He does look like a bug with Chrysler Buildings for arms.
Chrysler Buildings for arms.
And like a weird star proboscis sticking out of his head.
Mm-hmm. Where he shoots electricity or flames or heat, whatever it is that they do.
It's yellow, unlike Godzilla's blue.
It's yellow and it hurts. He's got wings, so he can fly. That's totally awesome. But in this movie, he jumps a lot. Do bugs jump?
Some bugs jump, yeah.
Are they scarier when they jump? Is that why he's jumping? Because it just looks silly.
It does look silly. He's a very silly-looking monster.
I don't think he's as silly-looking as Jet Jaguar, though.
No.
Like, Megalon is really intimidating. If there was a bug the size of the Empire State Building with razors for arms shooting heat out of its proboscis, no, thank you. I do not want to live in the city that's being terrorized by Megalon. I'm good. Thank you.
So the design is based on the Japanese rhinoceros beetle.
Oh.
Which I know about because they're worth a lot of money in Animal Crossing. So I like that. that about him.
Sure, yeah. But in Animal Crossing, he's not going to, stomp on your house and burn down your neighborhood. Isabel doesn't have to have a talk to you about, you can't keep that bug. That bug is not okay.
Yeah. All right. So that's our third contender.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, we've got a late appearance from Gigan, who comes from the previous Godzilla movie, Godzilla versus Gigan.
We would have called it a Godzilla universe had we had that nomenclature at the time.
Yeah. Gigan, he's the ultimate weapon of M Space Hunter Nebula aliens.
Neat. He's got razors for arms.
Well, they're sort of like sickles, I guess. Yeah, they're like weird little hooks, weird hook hands.
Uh-huh.
And I guess the M Space Hunter Nebula aliens are best friends with the Cetopians. And the Cetopians can just call them up and say, hey, buds, can you send your big monster down to help fight for us?
It's totally weird to me that a culture that's lived underground for 3 million years has friends in outer space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not looking for continuity or things that make sense in my Godzilla universe, but that's just a little too far for me, people.
Yeah, exactly. We don't get to see the aliens, the M Space Hunter Nebula aliens in this movie, but they kind of look like upright cockroaches.
Oh, they look like Megalons.
Well, yeah, they're a little more cockroachy even than Megalon is. But yeah, from the pictures I've seen, I did not go and watch Godzilla versus Gigan for this,
So again, what you're telling me is a culture that has lived underground for 3 million years and clearly knows a lot about underground bugs has a best friend in a space race that looks like bugs?
Something like that.
Again, weird.
You're really not encouraged to think too hard about that sort of thing. What you are encouraged to think about is which one of these is the cutest little guy.
So top two for me would be Godzilla and Megalon, not just because they're the titled creatures, but because they're actual creatures and not like robot-y things. So it would be one of those two because I think they're cuter than the other ones. And I gotta say, I gotta give it to the king of monsters. I think Godzilla's my number one.
Yeah, I mean...
Not just because he looks like Kermit.
No, it's mostly because he looks like Kermit. At least for me. I don't know. I'm curious to find out more about Gigan. It's such a weird one. He's got a circular saw for a belly. What's that like?
What the heck? I know.
It's such a weird design. I kind of like that, but certainly he's not shown off very well in this movie, and I don't want to watch his main movie.
Hey, everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 men in rubber costumes wrestling about today's experiment, Godzilla versus Megalon. Go, Chris, go!
Okay, the guy who plays the Emperor of the Cetopians is named Robert Dunham, an American actor living in Tokyo during the 60s and 70s. He appeared in a few other Godzilla films, but he also appeared in The Green Slime, which was the movie that MST3K featured in their 14-minute proof of concept video to sell the show to KTMA.
Robert Dunham also wrote 3 books while he was in Japan: Tokyo Unzipped, The Art of Being Japanese, and Alice in Blunderland, which, quote, are all satirical novels made to poke fun of the common stereotypes Americans have of the Japanese culture, end quote. You know what? I'm going to pass on those, thanks.
The kid in this episode, Roku-chan, is played by Hiroyuki Kawase, but this wasn't his first appearance in a Godzilla film. He is also the kid in 1971's Godzilla vs. Hedorah, and in that film, he's named, you guessed it, Ken. He also seems to have appeared in the TV show that was edited down to become Time of the Apes, though Sandy Frank may have left him on the cutting room floor.
Oh. Joel and the bots are pretending to host a morning show, and guess who's going to be on today?
And we'll talk to Mom's Mabley, and she'll tell us how she kept up a good attitude despite being dead for 20 years.
Moms Mabley was a comedian who rose up through the 20s and 30s in the so-called Chitlin Circuit, the informal network of venues where Black entertainers performed for Black audiences. She gained wider recognition in the 60s through national television appearances, including on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour.
Two other fun details about Moms Mabley. She was apparently doing explicitly lesbian comedy during the 20s and 30s, an aspect that she toned down in her later years, and she ended up having a top 40 hit with a 1969 cover of the song Abraham, Martin, and John when she was 75 years old. She was, in fact, the oldest person to hit the Billboard Top 40 until just a few weeks ago when Brenda Lee got to number 1 with Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree. The charts sure are weird now. Anyway, Moms Mabley, everybody.
Monster Island is feeling the effects of the nuclear tests in the Aleutian Islands, and Joel says,
"War is not good for monsters and other living things."
In 1967, Barbara Avedon, a writer for The Donna Reed Show and the future creator of Cagney and Lacey, she was getting frustrated with the escalation of the Vietnam War, so she created a grassroots anti-war group called Another Mother for Peace.
The first action that Another Mother for Peace organized involved creating Mother's Day cards. The cards were illustrated with a drawing of a sunflower and had the phrase, "War is not healthy for children and other living things," written on them. People were encouraged to send the card to their congresspeople, and they did by the hundreds of thousands. And then the slogan started appearing everywhere.
There are some unusual music cues in this film. When the couple are driving home from the earthquake, this is the soundtrack.
Well, at least they have Yusef Lateef on the flute here.
Who?
Reuben. Yusef, never mind.
Crow didn't know, and I didn't know either, but now I do. Yusef Lateef was a jazz musician who started off playing tenor sax and flute, but expanded his repertoire over the years to include quote-unquote exotic instruments rarely heard in jazz. Link in the show notes if you're curious.
When they're talking about how cool the monsters they invented are, Crow offers this.
My monster is silent as tomorrow. He kills in the night. He has been acquainted with the night.
Sounds like your monster reads frost, too.
Yeah, and he sprays it like icy death from his bloody stumps.
First off, amazing joke. Crow's poetic turn is inspired by Robert Frost's moody little poem, Acquainted with the Night. But that's not all. The bit about Silent as Tomorrow comes from a Langston Hughes poem, The Underground, dedicated to the anti-fascists of the occupied countries of Europe and Asia.
Okay, well, let's talk about the popcorn sketch. First things first, Orville Redenbacher grew up on a farm that grew corn for popping. And I guess he took an interest in the stuff because he spent the first 50 or 60 years of his life studying farming science and then working on developing a better hybrid of popcorn. When he found it, he was convinced to name his company and his popcorn after himself.
And so, in 1969, Orville Redenbacher's popcorn was popped into the world. And it was a hit. Such a hit that he and his partner sold their company a few years later. But the new owners kept Redenbacher around as a mascot and spokesperson for the brand. Redenbacher had a distinctive look: thick glasses, bow tie, suspenders, slicked back, middle-parted hair that screams, "I was a teenager in 1920." And he had a relaxed presence that did well in commercials.
But what if he had a partner? In the early 80s, the ad company auditioned all of Redenbacher's grandkids to see if any of them might work as a mini Orville. The grandchild they chose, apparently without Orville's input, was Gary. And so, during the 80s and 90s, Gary, dressed a lot like his grandfather, appeared in ads about the wonders of Orville Redenbacher popcorn. It was all very wholesome.
Which is why MST3K wanted to write a sketch about the dark, seedy underside that must be there under all that wholesomeness, I guess. Anyway, Gary was never really in the popcorn business, and when his grandfather died in 1995, he stopped appearing in commercials. And now he's an attorney, and really not connected with the glamorous world of popcornery.
And that's time.
So Godzilla is a fun word to say.
Yes, it totally is.
You know where the name Godzilla came from, by the way, right?
I mean, I know the original name of Godzilla was a Japanese word.
Yeah.
Gojira?
Yeah,
Something like that?
basically. My 2 years of Japanese on Duolingo are not helpful because Duolingo is not a very good program for learning languages. But let's put that aside. The name it seems to have been a portmanteau of gorira, the word for gorilla, and kujira, the word for whale.
Oh, he's a gorilla whale.
Yeah. So one of the things that is particularly fun about Godzilla now that it is in English is that the suffix zilla has been plucked off Godzilla, and it's become a suffix that you can add to other things.
True. And every time you do, it makes them completely destructive and unreasonable, like they're just going to come through your city and lay waste to everything. Charlotte Zilla. Chris Zilla.
Or, Mozilla.
Mozilla.
The software people who make Firefox.
Oh, they don't want me to be thinking about them destroying the entire world as they come through, do they?
I don't know. It's a portmanteau of Mosaic, which was an early browser, and Godzilla, right? So they are pulling on that a little bit.
Yeah, maybe they were trying to dominate the industry and at least get rid of their competitors.
Yeah. I mean, Wikizilla, which is the wiki that has all your lovely Godzilla information, that just makes sense. There's a giant extinct parrot species, a prehistoric parrot species that's known as Squawkzilla.
That sounds like such an awful pet, but suddenly I want one.
Well,
that's a terrible choice. Oh my gosh.
Well, you're 16 to 19 million years too late for that, but maybe we can Jurassic Park you up one.
No. I saw the Jurassic Park movies. That's a terrible idea. I don't want to live in a world dominated by monsters that are really, really big and destroy everything. I think Godzilla also convinces me of that. That's not a world I want to live in. It's one where my very existence is a little too tremulous.
And there's probably the most famous, I guess, version of this, which is Bridezilla.
Oh, my goodness. Yes. Oh, yeah. The Bridezilla thing, every time I've been involved in a wedding, which hasn't been all that often, but every time I've been involved in a wedding, someone accuses the bride of being a Bridezilla.
See, this didn't happen when I got married because there were no brides, but...
You say that, but it doesn't have to be the bride, right? Maybe somebody was accusing your mom of being a bridezilla because she was helping with everything.
It's true. They didn't, but yes.
Thank goodness, because that would have been totally unreasonable. It's a horrible word.
Yeah. Both Groomzilla and Momzilla have been attested, but I think for reasons... we tend to default to Bridezilla.
No, we do. I mean, sexism being one of those reasons, misogyny being another.
And a TV show being the third.
And a TV show. Well, the TV show's named after the idea, right? Like it's this horrible thing that we ask that women dream about getting married since they're a child, which, number one, weird. Can't they have more to do with their lives than just get married? I say yes, but this has been an expectation for a long time. So when you talk to people, and this comes up on the show Bridezillas, the brides are all like, I've been dreaming about this since I was a little girl, and I want my wedding to be perfect. And of course, brides are expected to give everybody a costume. They're expected to make all of their props. They're expected to find a venue. They're expected to staff the entire thing. They're expecting to cater it. They have to do all of the prop management. They have to do all the time management for everything. And then we get all upset when they get upset and stressed out, like, oh, you're demanding too much. And it's like I'm just trying to respond to what society has told me I'm supposed to expect for my own wedding. It's a lot of work to put on any event, right? If you're going to have an event that has any number of people, 50, 100, 200, right? That's a hard thing to plan. And then if you add on to it this societal expectation that it's an enormous event and a turning point in your history, and you're setting yourself up for your happily ever after, right? It's a really big amount of import that some women have been conditioned to put onto this, 5 hours worth of a day or something. And then you have all these people, like the Bridezilla show, I think, it's, first off, I'm going to say I watched a lot of it over the last month, far more than I needed to for this actual segment. And I don't watch a lot of reality TV because reality TV, for anybody who watches it, like, it's not real. It's not reality. I mean, it's not scripted, but at the same time.
No, it's carefully edited to emphasize certain things, and often not the nice things, but more the mean and fun things, if you like watching people tear each other down.
Well, geez, and if the show is called Bridezilla, the thing that they're going to be showing is women melting down because people aren't listening to them, because people are arriving late for rehearsals, because people are telling them that, oh, I don't want to buy that dress, or I don't want to wear that dress, or I don't like your dress. Like, it's all about what they're wearing as well. And just, oh, and I'm going to get strippers for your bachelorette party, but I know your future husband doesn't want you to have strippers. So let me just create this drama by giving you something that you don't want, your future husband doesn't want you to have, but I'm going to pay for it and make it happen anyway. And it's like, what are you doing that for? You're not a good friend. That's a terrible choice.
Well, yeah.
So,
I mean, at a certain point, when people know they're signing up to be on a show called Bridezilla, like, they're doing it because they're expecting the drama, right?
It's true. There was one woman who was on the show at one of the episodes that I watched where her parents were saying, I'm not going to come to your wedding if your wedding is going to be on the show Bridezilla.
Reasonable.
But she did not in any way consider that to be a reasonable thing, right? Because the show Bridezilla, like, it starts out with like a small interview with the couple talking about how they met, how they proposed and everything. But then it follows the bride through all of the stages of planning and through the bachelorette party. I think there's a requirement or something. I don't know. But it goes through the whole wedding day, from the morning to the wedding, through the wedding, and afterwards. And then it checks in with them like 3 months later or something like that to say, are you still together? Because that's the other thing, is the whole show is like, this woman's unhinged. This wedding's not going to last. I give them 30 days. I mean, like, that's the kind of things that they're narrating and the things that they're getting people involved in the wedding to say on camera. And then they check in with them 3 months later and they're like, well, were they able to stay together? Was this a happy marriage? Hint, hint, I don't think so. And it's just, it's terrible and cruel. So it's, I don't know, rough. You also have brides that are ordering dresses that are 2 sizes too small, being like, I'm going to lose a ton of weight. Seriously? Like, there's so many things like that where you're just like, that's a terrible plan, honey. Come on, don't do that.
Now, what they should do instead is buy a wedding dress that's several sizes larger than they should wear.
Right.
And it's also made out of rubber and shoots fire out of its mouth. And that's the Bridezilla that I would watch.
Oh my gosh!
Here comes the bride. Like, the groom doesn't, assuming it's a heterosexual thing, the groom doesn't get to know what the bride is wearing. And what the bride is wearing is Megalon's outfit.
Is my favorite kaiju!
That's
this is a relationship made in heaven.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you want to tell us all about how much you loved Godzilla -1, or if you want to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our email is info@itsjustashow, and we'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you, and like our randomly selected supporter, April. Thank you, April. For as little as $1 an episode, you too can be like April and help us research and record this show. You can join us in a friendly Discord, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/146.
Well, Chris, We've properly celebrated Gamuary. Merry, Merry Gamuary to everyone out there. What's up next here at It's Just a Show?
Well, we're going to be swinging into high with MST3K Season 4, Episode 15, The Beatniks, with a short General Hospital.
Man, I hope this next movie has, I don't know, a speaking role for a woman in it?
It has at least 2 women who speak.
Maybe to each other?
Probably. We'll find out when we find out. But until then...
Better luck next time, Kooky. What a mess!
Keep your shirt off. I'm coming. Take it away, Theme Squad.